You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. We're going to do something markedly different just for today on the program to shake things up and help with the hunkering down. The Surrealism Corner is going to be merged with part of Inside the Headlines in the news section, and also, doubtless, the Surrealism Corner will blend in with fighting words at the end of the show. This is because the Surrealism Corner is now everywhere and defines life as we think we know it. It's also because today the bulk of the show is thanks to my friend and sister Jane Fonda. It occurred to me that it might be helpful to listeners now and then to hear a guest talking about what solace and strength she draws from her personal comfort zone, what books, what music, foods, tasks, and so forth. So I asked Jane, and as always, she promptly showed up. Let's hurry then, because before Jane, we need to go inside those headlines and into the Surrealism Corner. Both. The deeper we go inside the headlines, the more surreal it gets. So let's try this bulletin style. Donald Trump prescribed drinking Clorox instead of orange juice so as to disinfect a person the same way you disinfect a toilet bowl. South Korea is one of the countries that can justly boast about their handling of the coronavirus. On March 8th of this year, the country made history by establishing its first ever feminist political party, the Women's Party, aimed at combating gender-based violence and discrimination, as well as the economic gender gap. Could this development and the efficiency the country demonstrated in handling the pandemic possibly be connected? New Zealand, deserving of praise for Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's handling of COVID-19, has also just updated its abortion laws. Ardern brought home her campaign promise to change a 1977 law that a woman had to convince a doctor her life or mental health were in jeopardy before gaining permission to end an unwanted pregnancy. But in March, New Zealand formally decriminalized all abortion, which is now an option for all women through the 20th week of pregnancy and with a health provider's approval after 20 weeks. Donald Trump instructed the scientists who try to advise him that they should find a way to put strong light, like from the tanning bed, inside a patient. Sort of like the way he puts himself inside the tanning bed. It would be another disinfectant, don't you see? Meanwhile, an unintended consequence of the pandemic in the United States is the boom in abortion via telemedicine. Access to clinics has been devastatingly limited, first by the religious right's vicious and sometimes violent assault on providers, and exacerbated by the pandemic lockdown. Several states, including Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, have tried to suspend access to such surgical procedures during the crisis. But over the past year, a program called teleabortion has expanded from serving 5 states to serving 13: Colorado, Georgia, Hawaii, Iowa, Maine, Minnesota, Montana, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, and Washington, adding 2, Illinois and Maryland, as the pandemic exploded. Teleabortion.org has all the information, and it's perfectly legal in its careful, caring, professional procedures of sending qualifying clients the pill. Far less expensive, private, no travel necessary, no coronavirus vulnerability, and no screaming protesters violating a woman's right to choose. Speaking of screaming protesters, were those the same hundreds and hundreds of people who phoned doctors, pharmacies, and the White House to check whether swallowing lit Christmas lights or guzzling bleach was true and worth doing? They actually had to check, you understand. They had to check. But here's something that might be true and actually worth doing. Scientists are wondering if hormones like estrogen, produced in far greater quantities by women than men, are the reason women are less likely to become acutely ill with COVID-19 and far more likely than men to survive. So last week, 2 teams of scientists, one on each coast, started treating COVID-19 patients with estrogen and possibly with progesterone as well, which has anti-inflammatory properties. Men getting doses of estrogen to save their lives. Can't help wondering what unintended consequences that might have. Trump, who refused to exercise executive powers requiring certain companies to manufacture desperately needed personal protective equipment for frontline health workers, this week used precisely those powers to require meat corporations to remain open, despite slaughterhouses, meatpacking, and shipping sites being hotspots for workers sick and dying with the virus. Now, if workers don't show up, they cannot get unemployment insurance. This is vile. Sex doll sales have surged during the pandemic, with sex doll websites seeing demand from single males of all sexual orientations more than double, with a 51% increase in sales between February and March. Orders placed by single females grew 15% in the same period. Researchers from the Schmidt Ocean Institute have encountered the longest creature so far seen on the planet. In the 2,000-foot deep waters off Australia's western edge, they spotted a coiled, stringy siphonophore, at least 150 feet long. For comparison, blue whales, the most massive creatures ever to have lived, only make it to nearly 100 feet long. Each siphonophore is actually a colony, a group of individual zooids, clusters of cells that clone themselves thousands of times to produce an extended, string-like body. Their motto could be E pluribus unum, out of many, one. There's a lesson somewhere in there for humans. It's time for our first break, and then we will be back and off into Fonda land, which is a very good place to be, especially these days. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
You know, I'm not going to spend time listing all the Oscars and the Emmys and the People's Choice and the awards and the international honors that have been inflicted on Jane Fonda, the actor, except to say she's a brilliant artist. She's also my sister co-founder, together with Gloria Steinem, the 3 weird sisters who founded the Women's Media Center. And she's a full-time activist as well. Her Netflix series co-starring with Lily Tomlin, the wonderful Lily Tomlin, Grace and Frankie, is a sudden reblooming of Jane at age 82, and her activism goes on increasing all the time. So she's here today to talk about what comforts her in times of such stress, and also the activism that is part of that comfort. Here is my beloved friend, Jane Fonda. Jane, dear pal, welcome back to the program in such uncertain times. It's very comforting to have you here.
Well, it's comforting to hear your voice, Robin. And, of course, radio is always great because you don't have to comb your hair. And
life
and
is
who
not...
wants to comb their hair in these days of total upside downness?
I certainly don't. I mean, but even unkempt, don't be ridiculous. You always look incredible, incredibly good. That is. So, listeners, we're gonna be chatting. Please eavesdrop on us chatting. We're gonna chat for a while on our predicament and stuff, and then Jane is doing me and I think listeners a great favor by. A lot of listeners have written in and said, well, what kinds of things are you reading or hearing that give you comfort and stamina these days? And I asked Jane that, and she's going to read a section of a writer who does precisely that for her. So first, we're going to just talk for a while. I'm very curious. Last time you were on the program, we talked about Fire Drill Fridays and the whole vast environmental effort that you were involved in. It's very difficult to do Fire Drill Fridays when you can't leave your house. So you're doing that digitally. Talk about that.
Yes. Well, for those who don't know what Fire Drill Fridays are, last fall in September over Labor Day, I decided that I wasn't doing enough, and inspired by the Swedish student Greta Thunberg and all the millions of student climate strikers, I decided that I would move to Washington, D.C., very much out of my comfort zone and try to put my body on the line. And we began this weekly action called Fire Drill Fridays, Friday being the day that Greta strikes and that all the young students strike. And I met with them, and they've been asking if old folks would please rise up with them. And I said, well, here I am. I'm 82. And I want to join. And so they often came and spoke at these weekly rallies that were followed by civil disobedience and risking arrest. And
you got arrested, what, four times?
Five times. And spent one night in jail. It was not my first night in jail. But anyway, there were 14 people who engaged in civil disobedience on the first Fire Drill Friday, and there were 343 on the last one that we did before I had to return to Los Angeles to begin filming Grace and Frankie. What was important about that number that I gave you is that most of them were people who had never engaged in civil disobedience before. Our goal was to try to awaken the sense of urgency in Americans who were concerned but had never done anything, never really put themselves on the line, and didn't know what to do. And what we discovered was, of course, that people were waiting to have something that they could do on a regular basis. And
right.
During the course of that time, people were coming from all over the country. Well, by now there's about 17 million people, 17,000 people in the United States that want to do Fire Drill Fridays locally. Well, when I moved here to California, we didn't want to let that momentum go. So we decided that we would have the first Friday of every month, we would do a rally here in California. California is very important. There are two states in the United States that are major oil producers. One is Texas, and the other is California. Mm-hmm. California's economy has been very much intertwined with oil. Oil has ruled the politics of California, and that continues unabated. And very often these oil drillings are right in neighborhoods next to schools and hospitals and churches. And so we were going to focus very much on that and pressure our Governor Gavin Newsom to agree to not expand any more fossil fuel development, no more exporting, no more drilling, and then gradually phase out.
Right.
And then the COVID-19 virus hit, and so we had to shut down even that. But again, because we didn't want to lose momentum, we do them now virally. Every Friday, we have what we're now calling our fireside fire drill chats, and that, which is me interviewing a prominent person in this space. Last Friday, it was Christiana Figueres, who negotiated the Paris Climate Agreement,
right,
which was very historic. The Friday before was the remarkable Nancy MacLean, who wrote a great book called Democracy in Chains, which kind of helped explain the corporate libertarianism which is governing our country at the current moment. And then on the first Fridays, we have more of a rally and more people coming. What is so wonderful for me to see is that I am now working with some brilliant organizers. Is there anything more wonderful than a truly inspired organizer? We're doing what's called distributed organizing or big organizing. It's when you have tens of thousands of people that want to be organized and you don't have the money, the wherewithal to hire people to go and do it in person. So you do distributive organizing, and we are doing that, and we are having hundreds of people sign up to be researchers for us all over the country, and we're just finding out great things. And usually when you have lists of people that have signed up, the response rate is maybe 18%, 25%. We have 55% of people that say, okay, I'm still here, and yes, I want to do this, and yes, I'm going to sign up. The organizers say they've never seen anything like it. And I think it's because people are ready. People want to do something more than just sign a petition.
Yeah.
They want to really feel that they're doing something meaningful. And if they don't, then they'll move on to somewhere else looking for that. So I feel very good. I feel that we're really involving a lot of people. And again, these are not people who have been part of the new left or the old left or these are new people to the movement. And I learned from Christiana Figueres, the negotiator of the Paris Climate Treaty, something that you probably have known, but I didn't. The research shows over and over and over again, unequivocally, that if you organize 3.5% of your population, you win. No effort that has had 3.5% of a population, part of it, has lost. So we think we can do that.
Yes.
It means 11 million people in the United States. But we think that with all the activism that's happening now and the disgust about the Trump administration, that we can get that many people to when we can once again come together to be able to force through what's needed. And what is needed, essentially, you have to listen to the science.
Yeah.
And one of the fallouts of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is people are realizing you have to listen to the science.
Don't you think that the pandemic, with all the horror that it has brought, is also not only a teachable moment, but is teaching a very vivid lesson that people who didn't get it before, either about science or about environment, or for that matter about women or any of the subjects we care passionately about, people who didn't get it before are actually getting it now. I mean, the skies over Punjab are so clear that they can spot the tops of the Himalayas for the first time in half a century. It's quite clear that humans have been have acted as, and don't have to, but have acted as a kind of virus on the planet, and the planet is hitting back. So it's a radicalizing experience for that 3%.
That's right. I totally agree with you. And the COVID-19 pandemic will fade, but the climate crisis won't.
Right.
And what the science says we have to do is stop all new fossil fuel development, gradually phase out existing over 30 years until mid-century when we arrive at net zero, and pass the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal, which should be started right now with this bailout money, is a way to provide good, clean, sustainable jobs to make our world better, starting with the most vulnerable communities that have been the most harmed by fossil fuel extraction. And it addresses the inequities that exist that are being laid bare before our very eyes more every day. It's the way to go. And that's why we need to build this army of activists fast, because whoever ends up in the White House, God forbid, it's, whether it's Biden or, God forbid, Trump, we're going to need to shut the place down. We're going to need to make our voices so heard that they can't do anything but respond to our demands. And I think we can do it, but we have very little time, and the bad part of this is that we can't get together.
I know.
So, but we're laying the groundwork, and a lot of very brilliant people all over this country and hopefully all over the world are working so that we come out the other side of this better than we went in.
Jane, how do people find Fire Drill Fridays or Fireside Chats and Fire Drill Fridays?
Well, you can text Jane to 877-877. That's Jane to 877-877. Or you can go onto our website, firedrillfriday.com/volunteer if you want to volunteer. There's so much really important work that we need people to do, and they are doing it, and it's just wonderful. Another thing I think that people are realizing is the importance of a strong government. We've had since the 80s, since Reagan and Thatcher, we've been bludgeoned with this idea that government is the problem, that we have to shrink it down, as Grover Norquist said, so it could be drowned in a bathtub. It's so small. But now we're realizing the importance of government and how horrible it is when government is not functioning properly. And so that's, I think, a very positive thing. We need to be prepared. We need to listen to science. And we need a strong government that works for people and not corporations. And we may be able to come out of this gaining all three of those things.
Well, historically, plagues have, certainly major ones, have so shaken up the areas that they've affected, and in this case, it's the whole world, that major social changes have followed in its wake, usually progressive ones. There's always a danger that strongmen kind of leaders emerge, but this time there's been such a dramatic evidence that the women leaders were more prepared, better prepared, not afraid to be afraid and act accordingly, and that the 93% of world leaders who are men had their toughness and their manliness to prove, with the notable exception of South Korea. So it's a time for shaking up a lot of attitudes, and I think that there's an entryway for a real consciousness shift at that point. I mean, the pandemic itself caused people to have to stay home. People having to stay home tanked oil prices that went for the first time ever to zero. So it's very interesting. There's a cause and effect. For every action, there's a reaction, which is the way the universe works. And it's not nice to fool Mother Nature.
That's right. There's action and reaction, and we just have to be sure that we seize the narrative and bend the reaction in the right direction.
Yes, precisely.
But as you say, a lot of people have woken up.
Yeah, and of course, the people who are still resisting this at this point are people who haven't been touched by it. But as it moves through the Midwest, the breadbasket, it will be hard to ignore it. It'll be hard to say it's a hoax. It'll be hard to say it's just a plot of the Democrats and the free press. I wince and grieve and dread. Dread is the real word I feel when I think of what will happen as it hits the heart of the global South, the African continent, and the heart of South America, because those are in such dire straits to begin with, and the shelter in place and social distancing are luxuries in a sense. You can't, you have no place to shelter, and you can't social distance if 13 of you live in a small hovel. So I dread that wave continuing. But without doubt, it's some wag said, this is the planet saying, all right, time out, everybody go to their rooms and think about what you've done. So how are you getting comfort in any of this, or sustenance, or what are you thinking and reading, and how are you feeding your soul?
Well, being active is what does it for me.
It always makes you feel better.
Yeah, it's just a great antidote for despair.
Yep.
And I've written a book about the Fire Drill Friday experience, and it's called "What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action." And I must say, once I made the decision to do this in D.C., my despair, my depression lifted, as it always does whenever I take action.
It's because
that for me is the antidote.
It's because you're releasing the oxytocin, my dear. Where is this book? Is it out? Is it being rushed out? Is it out already? I haven't seen it.
It's coming September 8th.
Okay.
I wrote it in 3 months, and talk about a fast. I started in December, and it's coming out September 8th. It's very fast. I love this book so much.
Say again what it'll be called.
What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action.
Yay. And
it's being put out by Penguin Books.
And it should say P.S. and my arrest on my 82nd birthday, but I won't go there. I will.
Yeah. Well, I tried to get arrested. They were supposed to put me in jail because it was my 5th arrest, and they didn't do it. They put other friends of mine in jail, but not me.
How dare they?
I know, because it would have gotten a lot of press, and the point is to let people know this is something you can do even if you're 82, and it's a good thing to do. I can't believe how many people who had never engaged in civil disobedience and been arrested felt transformed by the experience. There's so few opportunities to align your whole body with your deepest values.
Yes,
you know.
Yeah. Now, if people haven't got arrested, they should know it's a basic human event that a principled person should definitely have in their, how shall I put it, resume. And it is transformative, and the more you do it, the more transformative it is. So there you go. What else are you doing that is keeping you going?
Well, I have these clothes that I had made. I was going to start a line of athleisure wear.
Mm-hmm.
Then I decided I was never going to buy another piece of new clothing again. So I couldn't figure out what to do, but we're selling the sweatsuits, and the money's going to One Fair Wage to help all the millions and millions of people in the United States that depend on tips to survive.
Right.
And to Fire Drill Fridays, and they're selling like hotcakes. That's another thing I'm doing.
You know that now that people are stuck in their homes, that your videos are trending again? Did I forget to tell you that?
No, you did tell me, and I don't know if it's on purpose or an accident. I don't know. Well, I have to talk to the people who deal with that.
I think it's so wonderful. There you are in vogue all over again with women, and I presume some men. In homebound and doing the Jane Fonda workout. I just love it. I love it. And now even the sweatpants will be used. Everything gets used.
And I'm doing little movies for you. Have you ever heard of TikTok?
Yes.
Yeah, well, TikTok is a very cool new thing now for very, very young people. Well, I'm on TikTok also doing funny, I'll send you my latest little 15-second movie to help drive people to firedrillfridays.com.
Yeah, I wrote you that you were the busiest shut-in since Julian of Norwich, because she was forever seeing visions, and she was an anchorite in the Middle Ages, I think in the 13th century. I could be off by a century. But she became so popular because her writings were so witty and so loving that people flocked to see her and get her advice. So the irony was she was an anchorite, and she became an anchorite to have some quiet, to meditate and have her visions, and then she had no time for her visions. Anyway, it's a very good metaphor for who you are. We have to interrupt with a very short break here, but we'll be right back with Jane reading a selection from her personal comfort zone. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
What are you going to read?
I'm going to read a chapter from a book by Pema Chodron called When Things Fall Apart. The subtitle is Heart Advice for Difficult Times. She's a
Zen master, isn't she?
She is the abbot of a Zen monastery called Gampo Abbey.
Mm-hmm.
She's a little pixie of a woman. She's about your size, and she's totally delightful, and very wise. And I thought that this would be a good thing to read. This is a chapter called When Things Fall Apart.
Mm.
Shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Gampo Abbey is a vast place where the sea and the sky melt into each other. The horizon extends infinitely, and in this vast space float seagulls and ravens. The setting is like a huge mirror that exaggerates the sense of there being nowhere to hide. Also, since it is a monastery, there are very few means of escape. No lying, no stealing, no alcohol, no sex, no exit. Gampo Abbey was a place to which I'd been longing to go. Trungpa Rinpoche asked me to be the director of the abbey, so finally I found myself there. Being there was an invitation to test my love of a good challenge, because in the first years it was like being boiled alive. What happened to me when I got to the Abbey was that everything fell apart. All the ways I shield myself, all the ways I delude myself, all the ways I maintain my well-polished self-image, all of it fell apart. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't manipulate the situation. My style was driving everyone else crazy, and I couldn't find anywhere to hide. I'd always thought of myself as a flexible, obliging person who was well-liked by almost everyone. I've been able to carry this illusion throughout most of my life. During my early years at the Abbey, I discovered that I'd been living in some kind of misunderstanding. It wasn't that I didn't have good qualities. It was just that I was not the ultimate golden girl. I had so much invested in that image of myself, and it just wasn't holding together anymore. All my unfinished business was exposed vividly and accurately in living technicolor, not only to myself, but to everyone else as well. Everything that I had not been able to see about myself before was suddenly dramatized. As if that weren't enough, others were free with their feedback about me and what I was doing. Oh, It was so painful that I wondered if I would ever be happy again. I felt that bombs were being dropped on me almost continuously, with self-deceptions exploding all around. In a place where there was so much practice and studying going on, I could not get lost in trying to justify myself and blame others. That kind of exit was not available. A teacher visited during this time, and I remember her saying to me, "When you have made good friends with yourself, your situation will be more friendly too." I had learned this lesson before, and I knew that it was the only way to go. I used to have a sign pinned up on my wall that read, quote, "Only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found in us," unquote. Somehow, even before I heard the Buddhist teachings, I knew that this was the spirit of true awakening. It was all about letting go of everything. Nevertheless, when the bottom falls out and we can't find anything to grasp, it hurts a lot. It's like the Naropa Institute motto, quote, "Love of the truth puts you on the spot," unquote. We might have some romantic view of what that means, but when we are nailed with the truth, we suffer. We look in the bathroom mirror, and there we are with our pimples, our aging face, our lack of kindness, our aggression and timidity, all that stuff. This is where tenderness comes in. When things are shaky and nothing is working, we might realize that we are on the verge of something. We might realize that this is a very vulnerable and tender place, and that tenderness can go either way. We can shut down and feel resentful, or we can touch in on that throbbing quality. There is definitely something tender and throbbing about groundlessness. It's a kind of testing, the kind of testing that spiritual warriors need in order to awaken their hearts. Sometimes it's because of illness or death that we find ourselves in this place. We experience a sense of loss of our loved ones, loss of our youth, loss of our life. I have a friend dying of AIDS. Before I was leaving for a trip, we were talking, and he said, "I didn't want this, and I hated this, and I was terrified of this, but it turns out that this illness has been my greatest gift." He said, "Now every moment is so precious to me. All the people in my life are so precious to me. My whole life means so much to me." Something had really changed, and he felt ready for his death. Something that was horrifying and scary had turned into a gift. Things falling apart is a kind of testing and also a kind of healing. We think that the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem. But the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy. When we think that something is going to bring us pleasure, we don't know what's really going to happen. When we think something is going to give us misery, we don't know. Letting there be room for not knowing is the most important thing of all. We try to do what we think is going to help, but we don't know. We never know if we're going to fall flat or sit up tall. When there's a big disappointment, we don't know if that's the end of the story. It may be just the beginning of a great adventure. I read somewhere about a family who had only one son. They were very poor. This son was extremely precious to them, and the only thing that mattered to his family was that he bring them some financial support and prestige. Then he was thrown from a horse and crippled. It seemed like the end of their lives. 2 weeks after that, the army came into the village and took away all the healthy, strong men to fight in the war. And this young man was allowed to stay behind and take care of his family. See, life is like that. We don't know anything. We call something bad, we call it good, but we just don't know. When things fall apart and we're on the verge of we know not what, the test for each of us is to stay on that brink and not concretize. The spiritual journey is not about heaven and finally getting into a place that's really swell. In fact, that way of looking at things is what keeps us miserable. Thinking that we can find some lasting pleasure and avoid pain is what in Buddhism is called samsara, a hopeless cycle that goes round and round endlessly and causes us to suffer greatly. The very first noble truth of the Buddha points out that suffering is inevitable for human beings as long as we believe that things last, that they don't disintegrate, that they can be counted on to satisfy our hunger for security. From this point of view, the only time we ever know what's really going on is when the rug's been pulled out and we can't find anywhere to land. We use these situations either to wake ourselves up or to put ourselves to sleep. Right now, in the very instant of groundlessness, is the seed of taking care of those who need our care and of discovering our goodness. I remember so vividly a day in early spring when my whole reality gave out on me. Although it was before I had heard any Buddhist teachings, it was what some would call a genuine spiritual experience. It happened when my husband told me he was having an affair. We lived in northern New Mexico. I was standing in front of our adobe house drinking a cup of tea. I heard the car drive up and the door bang shut. And then he walked around the corner and without warning, he told me that he was having an affair and he wanted a divorce. I remember the sky and how huge it was. I remember the sound of the river and the steam rising up from my tea. There was no time, no thought. There was nothing, just the light and a profound, limitless stillness. Then I regrouped and picked up a stone and threw it at him. When anyone asks me how I got involved in Buddhism, I always say it was because I was so angry with my husband. The truth is that he saved my life. When that marriage fell apart, I tried hard, very, very hard, to go back to some kind of comfort, some kind of security, some kind of familiar resting place. Fortunately for me, I could never pull it off. Instinctively, I knew that annihilation of my old dependent, clinging self was the only way to go. That's when I pinned that sign up on my wall. Life is a good teacher and a good friend. Things are always in transition, if we could only realize it. Nothing ever sums itself up in the way that we like to dream about. The off-center, in-between state is an ideal situation, a situation in which we don't get caught and we can open our hearts and minds beyond limit. It's a very tender, non-aggressive, open-ended state of affairs. To stay with that shakiness, to stay with a broken heart, with a rumbling stomach, with the feeling of hopelessness and wanting to get revenge, that is the path of true awakening. Sticking with that uncertainty, getting the knack of relaxing in the middle of chaos, learning not to panic. This is the spiritual path. Getting the knack of catching ourselves, of gently and compassionately catching ourselves, is the path of the warrior. We catch ourselves 1 zillion times, as once again, whether we like it or not, we harden into resentment, bitterness, righteous indignation, harden in any way, even into a sense of relief, a sense of inspiration. Every day we could think about the aggression in the world, in New York and Los Angeles, Halifax, Taiwan, Beirut, Kuwait, Somalia, Iraq, everywhere. All over the world, everybody always strikes out at the enemy, and the pain escalates forever. Every day we could reflect on this and ask ourselves, am I going to add to the aggression in the world? Every day, at the moment when things get edgy, we can just ask ourselves, am I going to practice peace or am I going to war?
Wow.
Like all great Buddhist thinkers, it's so simple, right?
Yes.
It's so simple.
There's nothing pretentious about it. And her vernacular use of the language is very, unposturing, unpretentious, friendly, over a cup of tea in the kitchen, kind of voice. And in your voice, it's so moving, my dear.
I relate so much to that because I have had, oh my God, I remember when I found out that Tom, my second husband, was in love with another woman. And,
yes.
What Pema Chodron says in this, I remember the sky, the fact that it was blue, I took it personally. How can the sky be blue when I'm falling apart?
Right.
But you notice the steam coming from the tea, and I was wise enough back then, although I hadn't started studying Buddhism yet, but I simply, everybody said, oh, you have to stay busy, and I simply stayed quiet.
Always wise to stay quiet.
Stay quiet and stay close to the wall.
That's right.
And pay attention to who you spend time with and the things you watch on TV and the people you're with, the music that you listen to. All of this can help you or harm you. And so you have to be very intentional. And I really relate to this. So I hope that your listeners enjoyed that little passage.
Oh, very much so, indeed. And Jane, spell Pema Chodron's name and the name of the book again, in case they want to follow up.
Okay. Her name is Pema, and her last name is Chodron, Chodron. And the book is called, it's her most famous book, When Things Fall Apart.
And that certainly is one depiction of what is happening today on this planet, except that women leaders are stepping forth and not even showing off, but demonstrating there is different ways to govern and they save lives, except that the planet is showing that if you give us a little bit of relief, even the tiniest bit of cessation, we will rebound, except that there are ways into the fertile void, and we can change this. It is not a hopeless situation, and it gives us a chance to pause and also do something. There's another Zen saying that I've loved for a long time, which is that there are two things to do in life, and they're both like being in a garden. One is to sit, and the other is to sweep. In other words, there is the contemplative way and there is the activist way, but I don't think that they're necessarily bifurcated. And I think one can go from one to the other. Certainly you always have. And one informs the other. And people are relating to one another in ways they haven't in a long time now, or maybe ever in some cases. The people who are scrabbling simply to try to stay alive are where most of our efforts and our energy should be spent. Thank you.
Hear.
Thank you so much. I love you a lot, and thank you for doing this.
You're my dear friend, Robin. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to hear your voice and be on your radio show. And all the listeners, stay well, stay healthy, stay safe, love each other.
And it's time for our final break, and then I'll be back directly with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Unintended consequences can make for fighting words. Unintended consequences of an action or an event, by their nature, are shocking. They can't be predicted, unless they were so obvious they could have been predicted and so were ignored. They do sometimes offer hints or warnings, clues so subtle as to make sense only after the fact. Like a mutation, an unintended consequence can permanently alter the surrounding world. And again, like a mutation, an unintended consequence can be negative, rising alcoholism rates during the pandemic lockdown, or positive, clear skies over Los Angeles and Beijing, or both and, working from home. To a woman frantically seeking the way out of an unwanted pregnancy, discovering teleabortion.org is an unintended dream come true. To Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, learning that 41% of adults are now more likely than they were before the pandemic to support a government-run healthcare system, well, that's an unintended nightmare. Would you like to run this year on a platform bent on eradicating people's health care or leaving 28 million Americans with no health care at all? Issues like paid family leave and universal sick leave and subsidized daycare and a livable minimum wage, all of these were far-out wish list, crazy, radical liberal ideas pre-pandemic. They now sound quite reasonable to Americans who suddenly discovered a need for the support that only good government can provide, a need for the coordination that only real leadership can envision and mobilize, although it's taken a callous refusal of government support, plus incompetent, malevolent government leadership to make them realize that. Unintended consequences. Trump, always trying to fill the bottomless pit of his hunger for attention and approval, and also obsessively in love with his own voice, bulldozed his way through a series of endless press conferences, convinced that the TV ratings were high because the public loved him. It never occurred to him that people might tune in to stare and gawk with the same fascination that makes them drive more slowly by a car wreck. They also wanted to hear the scientific experts, not him. But only his plummeting poll numbers clued him in. Unintended consequences that he then denied flat out and thundered had to be wrong. The coronavirus pandemic has been more effective than any of us organizers could possibly hope to be. Unintended consequences aren't always dramatic social shifts, though. Sometimes they can be quite small, rather humble. For instance, I find the virtual return to a more natural look, enforced by circumstances, to be touching. TV newscasts, streamed Zoom meetings or fundraisers, appointments by Skype or FaceTime, all these uncover real people showing up. Their wardrobe is more limited and more relaxed. They need haircuts, and they've had to forego professional stylists. Some of the men are growing beards or mustaches and have triaged neckties. Some of the women have decided to explore their natural hair color, even bravely and beautifully, opting for pewter or silver after decades of dyes. Without the makeup artist finessing every false eyelash, anchor women look more like serious journalists they are than like glam fashion models. True, the lighting is uniformly atrocious, turning some people into storybook trolls who could frighten small children and turning everyone else into hosts on PBS. Unintended consequence? Reminding us all how essential a worker is the lighting director on any visual project. Still, the subtle shift in values is interesting. There's more focus on what someone is saying than on how she looks or on what he wears. Unintended consequences include the redefining and expanding of the concept of essential worker itself. 2 months ago, those words defined healthcare professionals and first responders, cops, firefighters, EMS. Now the society realizes that the UPS driver, the grocery checkout clerk, the mail deliverer, the janitor, the food messenger, the trash pickup, all these people are absolutely central to the needs of a reliant public. They always have been central, but the unintended consequence of the pandemic is to finally make them visible. In fact, one might say that the chance to realize how our society has been suffocating in artifice, superficiality, and virtualism is itself an unintended consequence of our predicament. That's good news and bad news. Bad news because it implies that the lessons have to be tortuously inscribed on our flesh, like the pandemic, in order for us to learn them, like the character in Kafka's great story, The Harrow. But the good news is that it also reminds us we're capable of learning. Some of the indigenous peoples of this continent teach that one must consider the ongoing wave effect, the consequences of one's actions, for 7 generations in the future. The responsibility that implies is breathtaking. Surely we can try to make a modest start so that the consequences of our actions today are at the very least intended. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and, yes, use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.